My name is Lillian Carter. 3 years ago, my husband stood in the center of our kitchen, loosened his silk tie, and calmly informed me that if I ever tried to leave him, I would fail within a month. He said I was too soft for the real world, too emotional, too dependent, too weak to survive without his paycheck. At the time, I believed him. I was 34 years old. I had spent 11 years raising our children, managing our home, supporting his career, and shrinking myself into the background so his life could expand without resistance. My husband, Ethan Carter, was the kind of man people admired instantly. Tall, polished, articulate, he worked as a senior financial consultant for a private investment firm in downtown Chicago. He wore expensive watches, spoke with quiet confidence, and treated every conversation like a boardroom negotiation. To the outside world, Ethan looked like a devoted provider. Inside our home, he operated like a warden. Before I tell you how the man who claimed I would never survive without him ended up begging me for help outside a federal courthouse, take a second to subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from tonight. Let me take you back to the exact moment I realized my marriage was not a partnership. It was a cage? The realization arrived on a Thursday evening in late October. Rain hammered against the kitchen windows while I stood, barefoot at the stove, stirring soup with one hand and helping my youngest daughter, Emma, practice spelling words with the other. The house smelled like garlic, wet coats, and the cinnamon candle I only burned when Ethan was in a good mood. I had spent the entire day cleaning because Ethan was hosting one of his work colleagues for dinner. Every pillow sat perfectly angled on the couch. Every surface gleamed at 6:17 p.m. The front door opened. Heavy footsteps crossed the hardwood floor. Ethan entered the kitchen carrying his leather briefcase and talking loudly on his Bluetooth headset about a six-figure investment account. His charcoal coat was damp from the rain. He barely acknowledged me. Emma looked up excitedly. Daddy, I got 100 on my spelling test. Ethan muted his call for less than 2 seconds. Good job, sweetheart. Then he unmuted the phone and walked away. Emma's smile faded. I felt the familiar ache settle in my chest. The ache of watching your children slowly realize they ranked below a man's ego. 20 minutes later, Ethan's coworker arrived. His name was Daniel. Daniel was younger, louder, and deeply impressed by wealth. He laughed too hard at Ethan's jokes and spent the entire evening complimenting our house. At one point, Daniel looked around the dining room and smiled. You're lucky, man. You've got the perfect setup. Beautiful wife, beautiful kids, beautiful house. Ethan took a sip of wine. Then he laughed. Not a warm laugh, a cruel one. He looked directly at me and said, trust me, none of this would function without my income. Daniel chuckled awkwardly. Ethan continued. Lillian means well, but she's never really handled the real world. She wouldn't last a month on her own. The room went quiet. I felt heat crawl up my neck. Daniel shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I tried to laugh it off, but Ethan wasn't joking. He leaned back casually and began listing everything he paid for. The mortgage, the cars, the groceries, the school tuition, insurance. Every word landed like a receipt for my existence. Then he delivered the sentence that changed my life. If I disappeared tomorrow, he said calmly, Lillian would completely fall apart. Daniel looked down at his plate. I stared at my husband, and something inside me cracked. Not loudly, quietly, like ice, beginning to split under pressure, because the terrifying part wasn't that Ethan believed it. The terrifying part was that I did too. For 11 years, Ethan had slowly dismantled my confidence piece by piece. When we first met, I worked as a pediatric nurse. I had my own apartment, my own savings account, my own car, my own identity. But after our second child was born, Ethan convinced me to stay home temporarily. Became permanent. He said daycare costs were ridiculous. He said the children needed stability. He said his career was accelerating and one parent needed to manage the household. At first, it sounded reasonable. Then the isolation began. Ethan handled all finances. Every account existed under his control. If I wanted money, I had to ask. Not because we struggled financially. We were wealthy. But Ethan believed dependence created obedience. He monitored spending through budgeting apps. He questioned grocery receipts. He once lectured me for 20 minutes because I bought a winter coat without discussing it first. Over time, I stopped asking for things. It was easier, smaller, safer. By the time Emma turned 6, I barely recognized myself. I awoke before sunrise every day, packed lunches, washed uniforms, scheduled dentist appointments, managed homework, cleaned bathrooms, cooked meals, organized birthday parties, handled fevers, handled nightmares, handled every invisible task required to keep a family alive, and somehow, Ethan still treated me like a financial burden. That night after Daniel left, I stood at the sink, washing wine glasses while rain tapped softly against the windows. Ethan walked into the kitchen loosening his tie. You embarrassed me tonight, he said. I turned slowly, You humiliated me in front of your coworker. He shrugged. I told the truth. I gripped the edge of the counter. You think I contribute nothing? Ethan looked genuinely confused by the question. I think you contribute domestically, he replied, but let's not pretend that's equivalent to financial responsibility domestically. The word sounded clinical, like I was an appliance. He walked upstairs. Without another glance, I remained alone in the kitchen, listening to the dishwasher hum. Emma appeared quietly in the hallway wearing dinosaur pajamas. She rubbed her eyes sleepily. I forced a smile. What's wrong, baby? She hesitated, then she whispered the sentence that shattered me completely. Would we be homeless without Daddy? I stopped breathing. Children absorb everything. Every sigh. Every insult. Every imbalance. Ethan wasn't just controlling me anymore, he was teaching our daughters that love looked like dependency, that security belonged to whoever held the paycheck, that power belonged to whoever controlled the money. That night, after the children fell asleep, I sat alone in the dark living room, staring at the family photos lining the fireplace. In every picture, Ethan stood confidently at the center. I stood slightly behind him, smiling, supporting, fading for the first time in 11 years. I asked myself a terrifying question. What if my husband needed me weak? The thought followed me for weeks. Once you recognize manipulation, you start seeing it everywhere. I noticed how Ethan corrected me publicly, how he interrupted my stories, how he laughed whenever I mentioned working again. How he called my nursing career cute whenever his friends asked about my background. Began noticing financial inconsistencies. Ethan earned extraordinary money. Yet he constantly acted stressed. Obsessive. Protective. Paranoid. He guarded his office like a vault. His laptop remained locked. His phone never left his hand. At first, I assumed it was normal corporate confidentiality. Then, one Saturday afternoon, I found something strange. Ethan had left his suit jacket hanging over the dining room chair. I reached into the pocket while gathering clothes for dry cleaning. Folded receipt slipped out. I almost ignored it. Then I saw the amount, $14,870. The receipt came from a luxury jewelry store downtown. My stomach tightened up. Hadn't received jewelry. Not for years. The purchase date was 3 days earlier. I stood alone in the dining room, staring at the numbers. A cold sensation crawled down my spine. That evening, I asked Ethan about it casually. He didn't hesitate. For a client, he said immediately. Too quickly. Too polished. The answer had been prepared. Then he smiled. You're getting suspicious in your old age. Old age? I was 34. The comment was designed to sound playful, but manipulation often hides inside humor. That night, Ethan locked his office door before bed. He had never done that before. 3 days later, I discovered the truth. Not because Ethan confessed. Because his mistress made a mistake. Her name was Vanessa. I learned that while standing in the frozen food aisle at a grocery store. I was comparing cereal prices when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Normally I ignored unfamiliar calls. Something told me not to. Answered. A woman's voice filled my ear. Calm. Confident. Amused. You don't know me, she said, but I think you deserve the truth about your husband. My heart slammed against my ribs. I gripped the shopping cart handle. The fluorescent lights suddenly felt too bright. The grocery store noise faded into a distant blur. The woman explained that she had been dating Ethan for almost a year. She believed he was separated. Then she discovered he was still married. She found my social media. She saw pictures of our daughters, and she realized Ethan lied to both of us. I expected devastation. Instead, I felt something colder. Clarity. Vanessa agreed to meet me the next morning. We sat inside a quiet coffee shop downtown. She arrived wearing a camel coat and carrying a designer handbag. Beautiful. Polished. Nervous. The exact kind of woman Ethan admired. She slid her phone across the table. Messages. Photos. Hotel confirmations. Weekend trips. Expensive gifts. The jewelry receipt wasn't for a client. It was for a diamond bracelet. Vanessa looked ashamed. He told me you depended on him financially, she whispered. He said you stayed because you couldn't survive alone. I stared at the photos. Ethan smiling on a beach. Ethan holding wine glasses. Ethan looking relaxed. Happy. Free. The man who came home every night acting burdened by his family looked effortless beside another woman. Then Vanessa said something that changed the direction of my entire life. He's hiding money. I looked up slowly. What? Vanessa leaned forward. He used to brag about moving assets around during his divorce preparation. Air left my lungs. Divorce preparation. Ethan wasn't just cheating, he was planning. Vanessa explained that Ethan frequently discussed finances after drinking, mentioned offshore accounts. Shell companies. Hidden investments. He said he refused to lose half his money in a future divorce. I felt physically ill. For months, Ethan had been quietly constructing an escape route while continuing to control every aspect of my existence. He wanted me trapped, dependent, financially. Helpless, so, when he eventually discarded me, I would accept whatever scraps he offered. I drove home in silence. Snow drifted softly across the highway. Inside my chest, something fundamental shifted. Fear transformed into focus. That evening, Ethan returned home carrying takeout sushi like a man performing generosity. He kissed my forehead. Casually, asked about the children, complained about traffic. I watched him carefully. For the first time in 11 years, I stopped seeing my husband as powerful. I started seeing him as strategic. And strategy leaves patterns. Over the next 3 weeks, I began quietly gathering information. I moved carefully, slowly, like prey, learning the layout of a hunter's trap. I reopened an old email account Ethan forgot. EXISTED. I retrieved my nursing license information. Online, I started rebuilding pieces of myself in secret. One afternoon, while Ethan showered upstairs, I entered his office. The room smelled like leather and expensive cologne. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined the walls. Everything sat perfectly organized. Controlled. Curated. Opened filing cabinets methodically. Documents were standard investment reports. Then I found a folder labeled Horizon Consulting LLC. The name meant nothing to me. Until I opened the bank statements. The account contained over $480. My vision blurred. The account existed entirely outside our marital finances. Ethan had been diverting money for years. I photographed every document using my phone. Then I found something worse, a draft email exchange between Ethan and a divorce attorney. My pulse thundered in my ears as I read. The attorney recommended minimizing spousal support by demonstrating my lack of employment history and financial independence. Ethan responded with one sentence: "Trust me, she won't fight back." I sat alone in that office, staring at the screen. 11 years. 11 years of sacrifice. And my husband viewed me like a legal inconvenience to manage efficiently. Not a partner, not the mother of his children. An obstacle. That night, Ethan came home unusually cheerful. He poured himself whiskey and sat beside me on the couch. "You've seemed distant lately," he said. I forced a small smile. "Just tired." He studied me carefully. Ethan possessed excellent instincts for emotional shifts. Control-oriented people notice changes immediately. Then, he wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "No, I take care of everything for this family, right?" The sentence sounded affectionate. It wasn't. It was a warning. A reminder. A reinforcement of hierarchy. I leaned against him, pretending compliance while mentally cataloging every hidden account and legal document inside his office. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Her name was Rebecca Sloan. Rebecca specialized in financial concealment during high-net-worth divorces. She listened silently while I explained everything. When I finished, she asked one question: "Do you want to survive this marriage, or do you want to win?" The question stunned me. Because until that moment, survival was the highest outcome I imagined. Rebecca changed that. Over the next 2 months, my life became a secret operation. I gathered records, photographed statements, documented hidden transfers, copied tax returns. Rebecca discovered Ethan had concealed nearly $1.2 million through layered business accounts. He also planned to file for divorce immediately after securing a major promotion at work. The timing mattered. He wanted maximum leverage. Meanwhile, Ethan remained completely confident. He still lectured me about spending, still acted superior, still treated me like someone too fragile to survive independently. One night during dinner, he casually announced he would be traveling to Miami for a finance conference. Vanessa later confirmed the trip was actually a vacation with another woman. Not even her, another one. Ethan wasn't just unfaithful. He was addicted to deception. By January, Rebecca finalized our strategy that we would not confront Ethan emotionally. We would confront him legally, quietly, precisely, devastatingly. Opportunity arrived unexpectedly. Company announced a large corporate gala celebrating executive promotions. The event would include investors, senior leadership, and local business press. Ethan obsessed over appearances. This gala mattered enormously. He purchased a new tuxedo, reserved a luxury hotel suite, spent hours rehearsing speeches in front of the bathroom mirror. 3 days before the event, he walked into the kitchen, smiling. "I got the promotion," I congratulated him softly. Then he delivered the sentence he believed would break me. "I think it's finally time we discuss our future realistically." My stomach tightened. Ethan sat across from me, calmly. He explained that our marriage had become stagnant, that he felt emotionally disconnected. We wanted different things. Every line sounded rehearsed. Clinical. Then he leaned back confidently. "Willing to help you transition," he said, "but you need to understand that financially, you can't maintain this lifestyle alone." Transition. Like I was an employee being terminated. Slid a folder across the table. Inside were preliminary divorce terms, a tiny apartment allowance, minimal support. Primary custody leaning heavily toward him. My hands went cold. Ethan believed I had no idea about the hidden money. No lawyer. No plan. No leverage. He expected panic. Tears. Begging. Instead, I looked up quietly and smiled. His expression flickered. Just briefly. Indeed, people become deeply uncomfortable when outcomes stop following their script. Is something funny? He asked. I closed the folder gently. No, I said softly. I just think this conversation is going to age badly for you. For the first time in 11 years. Ethan looked uncertain. The gala arrived on a snowy Saturday evening. Downtown Chicago glowed beneath freezing winter lights. The ballroom overflowed with executives, investors, photographers, and polished corporate smiles. Women wore diamonds, discussed markets and acquisitions. Everything smelled like expensive perfume and ambition. Ethan thrived in environments like this. He moved through the crowd, shaking hands confidently. Laughing. Performing. I stood beside him wearing a dark navy gown. Rebecca helped me choose. Elegant. Simple. Controlled. Ethan assumed I attended as decoration. He had no idea I came prepared for war. Halfway through the evening, the company CEO stepped onto the stage to announce promotions and executive recognition. Applause thundered across the ballroom. Then, Ethan's name echoed through the speakers. The crowd cheered. Ethan smiled brilliantly, kissed my cheek for the cameras, then walked toward the stage. The CEO handed him a crystal award. Ethan adjusted the microphone. He began delivering a speech about discipline, sacrifice, and leadership. I watched him carefully. The confidence. The charm. Performance. Then Rebecca touched my arm gently. It's time. My pulse accelerated. 2 federal financial investigators entered the ballroom through the side doors. Dark suits, serious expressions. No flashing lights. No dramatic sirens. Just quiet authority. The energy in the room shifted. Instantly, people noticed. Executives stopped talking. The CEO's smile faded. Ethan continued speaking for 3 more seconds. Before realizing nobody listened anymore, he turned slowly. Saw the investigators and froze. One investigator approached the stage calmly. The ballroom fell silent. The investigator identified himself clearly. Then, served Ethan with federal financial fraud documents in front of 400 people. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Camera flashes exploded. The investigator announced an immediate investigation regarding concealed assets, tax irregularities, and corporate ethics violations connected to offshore financial activity. Ethan's face strained of color. The confident executive vanished instantly. In his place stood a terrified man, realizing control had evaporated publicly. CEO looked horrified. Board members whispered frantically. Investors exchanged alarmed glances. Then the second investigator approached me. The ballroom collectively held its breath. He handed me a separate folder. Not accusations. Documentation. Legal acknowledgement recognizing me as the cooperating spouse who helped expose concealed financial misconduct. Suddenly, the narrative changed. It was no longer the dependent housewife. I was the woman who uncovered the fraud. The room looked at me differently. Not with pity. With respect. Ethan realized it too. His eyes locked onto mine. For the first time in our marriage, he looked afraid of me. The aftermath was brutal. Ethan's promotion disappeared. Overnight. His company launched an internal audit. Financial investigators uncovered hidden commissions, undeclared accounts, and unethical transfers tied to client investments. The scandal spread quickly through Chicago's financial community. Kazek stopped returning his calls. Friends distanced themselves. People who once admired him suddenly avoided eye contact. Power built on image collapses violently. Once the image cracks, meanwhile, the divorce proceedings transformed completely. Rebecca dismantled Ethan's financial concealment in court, piece by piece. Every hidden account. Every shell company. Every offshore transfer. Every attempt to reduce support. The judge was not amused, especially after learning Ethan deliberately manipulated financial dependency throughout the marriage. One point during testimony, Ethan attempted to portray me as financially incompetent. Rebecca responded by presenting 11 years of household management records. Calendars. Medical schedules. School coordination, budgeting, logs. Childcare documentation. The judge looked directly at Ethan, then said something I will never forget. Mr. Carter, your wife has been operating an unpaid executive management role inside your household for over a decade while simultaneously raising your children. Let's not confuse lack of salary with lack of capability. Ethan stopped speaking after that. The final settlement devastated him, not because he lost money, because he lost control. I received substantial assets, the house. Support. Retirement percentages, educational reimbursement, but the financial victory wasn't the most important part. The most important part happened 6 months later. I returned to nursing. My first shift terrified me. I sat in the hospital parking garage, gripping the steering wheel, while anxiety clawed through my chest. What if Ethan was right? What if I failed? What if the world moved on without me? Then a little girl entered the emergency room holding a stuffed rabbit. An instinct returned instantly. Compassion, training, purpose, the parts of myself. Ethan spent 11 years shrinking, had never disappeared. They had simply been buried. Recovery wasn't cinematic, it was exhausting. I had panic attacks buying groceries alone. I cried the first time I paid bills independently. I struggled balancing shifts and motherhood, but every difficult moment belonged to me. Every decision, every success, every mistake, mine. One afternoon, almost 2 years after the divorce began, I received a phone call from an unknown number. I answered absent-mindedly while folding laundry. Then I heard Ethan's voice. I hadn't spoken to him directly in months. He sounded different, smaller. He asked if we could meet. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met outside a federal courthouse downtown. Rain drizzled across the city. Ethan stood near the entrance wearing an old overcoat. He looked thinner, older, tired. The arrogance that once filled entire rooms had collapsed inward. We sat on a bench overlooking the street. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Then Ethan finally looked at me. "I need help," he said quietly. The irony nearly stole my breath. This was the man who once claimed I would collapse without his paycheck. Now he sat beside me facing legal penalties, financial ruin, and professional isolation. He explained that several civil lawsuits remained unresolved. He struggled financially. His reputation was destroyed. Then he said, something astonishing. "I never thought you'd actually make it on your own." I studied him carefully. For the first time, Ethan sounded honest. Not manipulative. Not strategic. Just stunned. Because people like Ethan mistake control for strength. They assume dependency equals weakness. They believe the person earning money automatically possesses greater value. But real strength looks different. Real strength wakes up exhausted and keeps going. Real strength raises children while carrying invisible emotional weight. Real strength survives humiliation, rebuilds identity, learns fear, then moves anyway. I looked at Ethan sitting beneath the gray Chicago sky and realized something profound. He had spent 11 years convincing me I needed him because he could never survive being unnecessary. I stood slowly, adjusted my coat, and told him the truth. "You were wrong about me." Then I walked away. The wind carried cold rain through the streets. As I crossed the intersection toward the parking garage, my phone buzzed. A photo message from Emma. She had just received an award at school. The picture showed both my daughters, smiling proudly. Strong. Confident. Unafraid. Unafraid. And suddenly I understood the real victory, not the divorce settlement, not the courtroom, not the public humiliation. The real victory was breaking the inheritance of fear. My daughters would never grow up believing love required dependence. They would never mistake control for protection. They would never shrink themselves to make another person feel powerful, because they watched their mother survive. Not perfectly. Not easily, but completely. 3 years ago, my husband said I was too weak to survive without his paycheck. Today, I pay my own bills, drive my own car, own my own home, raise my daughters, work 12-hour hospital shifts, and sleep peacefully in a house where nobody monitors what I spend, where I go, or who I become. The strange thing about freedom is that it feels terrifying right before it feels beautiful, and sometimes the people who work hardest to convince you that you are weak are the people most terrified of discovering your strength. If you enjoyed today's story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and remember this: financial dependence is not proof of weakness, but weaponizing dependence against someone who loves you is proof of cowardice. Thank you for listening.